The rain does not care who you are. It fell on the powerful and the broken with equal violence that night, soaking Minjae's empire in cold indifference and soaking Amara Blake to the bone as she walked, one hand clutching her diary, the other pressed gently against the curve of her belly. She was not running. Amara Blake did not run. She was leaving. Quietly.
Permanently.
The way only a woman who has made up her mind can leave. Behind her, 40 floors up in the most expensive penthouse in Gangnam, sat a man who controlled half of Seoul's underground. A man whose phone calls ended arguments between nations. A man who had once told Amara, "I have never been afraid of anything in my life. Until you." And now she was gone. Inside the penthouse, Minjae's phone buzzed with the usual reports, shipments, territory disputes, alliance updates. Things that used to feel like oxygen. Tonight, they felt like noise. Because Amara's coat hook was empty. Her slippers were missing. And on the kitchen counter, her wedding ring sat in a small, deliberate circle, like a full stop at the end of a sentence he never saw coming. Min-jae stood there, the most dangerous man in Korea, and felt something he had no word for. Not anger, not pride, not power, just hollow. He had lost empires before and rebuilt them before breakfast. But standing in that silent penthouse, staring at that ring, Kang Min-jae understood, for the very first time, that some things cannot be rebuilt. They can only be earned back. Slowly. Painfully. If you are even worthy of the chance. And so the real story begins. Not with gunfire. Not with power. But with a pregnant woman, a rainy night, and a mafia boss who finally had something to be genuinely afraid of. Min-jae had been in a meeting for 3 hours when the feeling hit him.
Not a sound.
Not a sight. Just a feeling, the specific, nauseating kind that only arrives when something is very, very wrong. He had felt it twice before in his life. The night his father was ambushed, and the morning his first shipment was seized at Incheon port. Both times, the feeling had been right. He excused himself mid-sentence, which, in the world of Kang Min-jae, was the social equivalent of flipping a table, and stepped out of the boardroom while 6 of Seoul's most dangerous men blinked at each other in confused silence. He called Amara. No answer. He called again. Nothing. He told himself it was nothing. Pregnant women slept deeply. She had probably knocked the phone off the nightstand again. She did that twice a week and then spent 10 minutes blaming the nightstand personally, by name, as though furniture could feel shame. He smiled at the thought. Then he called again. Still nothing. Min-jae was back in his car in 4 minutes. The drive that usually took 25 minutes took 11. His driver wisely said nothing. He took the elevator up alone. The penthouse was silent in the particular way that only happens when someone who usually fills a space is gone. Amara had a presence that didn't require sound. She hummed while reading, tapped her foot while thinking, laughed at things that happened inside her own head, and then refused to explain them. The apartment always felt like her. Tonight it felt like a museum. He saw the ring before he saw anything else. Small. Gold. Simple. She had chosen the simplest band in the store, which had horrified the jeweler and charmed Min-jae completely. He picked it up, held it between his fingers. Then he did something Kang Min-jae had not done in 15 years. He sat down on the kitchen floor.
Just sat there.
On the cold marble, back against the cabinet, ring in his palm, staring at nothing. His second in command, a sharp-faced man named Baek Sung-jin, found him there 12 minutes later after multiple unanswered calls and nearly had a medical emergency himself. Sir, Sung-jin stopped, looked around, looked at Min-jae on the floor, looked at the ring, did the math.
Oh no.
Find her, Min-jae said. His voice was completely calm, which, anyone who knew him understood, was actually the most terrifying version of Kang Min-jae that existed. Sung-jin pulled out his phone immediately. And Sung-jin. Min-jae finally looked up. If she doesn't want to be found, you will tell me that too. You will not bring her back by force. You will not frighten her. You will not so much as raise your voice within 500 meters of that woman. Are we understood? Sung-jin, a man who had once stared down an entire rival syndicate without blinking, swallowed quietly. Understood, sir. Good. Min-jae stood up, straightened his jacket, and slipped the ring into his breast pocket, right over his heart.
Now.
Start with the ghost houses in Itaewon. She always said she loved the lights there. He said it with such soft certainty that Sung-jin paused at the door. You know her that well, sir? Min-jae buttoned his jacket. Clearly not well enough. The search for Amara Blake began at 2 a.m. on a rainy Thursday. What they did not know, what Min-jae could not have imagined, was that finding her would be the easy part. Understanding what she had been carrying alone, in silence for months, that would be what finally broke him. Chapter 2. The Woman Who Rebuilt Herself in a Guest House. Amara had exactly 43,001, a dead phone battery, and 7 months of pregnancy when she pushed open the door of the Itaewon guest house. The woman at the front desk, a small, round-faced lady named Madame Cho, who looked like she exclusively ate dumplings and judged people's life choices, stared at Amara for a long moment. You look terrible, Madame Cho said, in perfectly blunt Korean. I know, Amara replied, in the Korean she had spent 2 years learning just to make Min-jae smile. Can I have a room, please? Madame Cho looked at her belly, then at her lack of luggage, then back at her face. Her expression cycled through about 9 emotions in 4 seconds. Room 7, she finally said, sliding a key across the desk. Breakfast is at 8. The ondol floor is heated. Don't cry loudly. The walls are thin. Amara blinked. I wasn't planning to cry. Madame Cho gave her a look that said, Sweetheart, I have been running this guest house for 22 years. Then she disappeared behind a beaded curtain. Room 7 was small.
Clean. Warm.
It smelled like wood and dried citrus and something vaguely like safety. Amara sat on the edge of the low bed, plugged her phone into the wall charger left thoughtfully on the nightstand, and opened her diary. She wrote for 3 hours. Not about Min-jae. Not about the photograph. Not about the woman in the red dress whose name she didn't even know and honestly didn't want to. She wrote about herself. About the Amara Blake who had existed before Seoul, before the penthouse, before falling in love with a man who carried the city's secrets like a second skeleton. She wrote about her grandmother in Atlanta, who made sweet potato pie every Sunday and said, Baby girl, a soft heart is not a weak heart. It's the bravest kind. She wrote about the first time she had felt brave enough to love Min-jae without reservation, in Jeju, walking barefoot on black volcanic rock while he pretended not to be terrified she would fall. She wrote, I think I gave him all of me and forgot to keep a piece for myself. That's not his fault. That's mine. And I'm taking it back now. Then she fell asleep with the pen still in her hand. In the morning, Madame Cho knocked at exactly 8, delivered a tray of mayakguk, seaweed soup, traditionally eaten by pregnant women, and said, Good for the baby, before leaving without further comment. Amara stared at the soup, then burst out laughing. Full, real, slightly hysterical laughter. The kind that comes out when you have been so serious for so long that your body just gives up and releases the pressure. It felt wonderful. Over the next few days, she settled into a small, quiet life. Morning walks when the rain cleared. Soup from Madame Cho. Long hours of writing. She found a small clinic 2 streets over where a kind doctor named Dr. Park checked on the baby, declared everything perfectly healthy, and asked no personal questions whatsoever, which Amara considered him a genius for. She was healing. Quietly. Stitch by stitch. What she did not know was that Min-jae's younger brother, Kang Dae-hyun, 26 years old, embarrassingly handsome, and blessed with the emotional intelligence that had somehow skipped his older brother entirely, was sitting in a ramen shop across the street. Watching. Waiting. Because he had found her 3 days ago, and he was trying to decide what to do about it. Dae-hyun had not told Min-jae yet. This was, objectively, the most dangerous thing he had ever done, and he had once accidentally started a fire in their father's private library at age 9 and blamed it on the cat. The cat had not even been in the building that day. Min-jae had known. He had never said anything. He had just looked at Dae-hyun with that older brother expression that said, "I know, and I'm storing this." Dae-hyun had lived under that stored knowledge for 17 years. This current situation was significantly worse than the library fire. He sat in the ramen shop, methodically destroying his third bowl in 2 hours, watching Amara Blake through the window as she walked back toward the guest house from her morning clinic visit. She walked slowly, one hand on her belly, stopping to look at a street cat with such complete, pure delight that Dae-hyun's chest did something uncomfortable. He pulled out his phone, opened his brother's contact, stared at it, called it. "Tell me you found her," Min-jae answered.
No greeting. No preamble.
Just those 4 words, carrying the entire weight of 3 sleepless days. "I found her," Dae-hyun said. Silence. Then, a sound Dae-hyun had never heard from his brother before.
I didn't see it.
A breath. Shaky. Just barely.
Is she? She's okay. The baby is okay. She's healthy. She's resting. She looks. He paused, watching Amara crouch, carefully, comically, because 7 months pregnant and crouching is genuinely a whole athletic event, to offer her hand to the street cat. She looks like herself, young. Maybe more than I've seen in a while. Another silence. This one heavier. "Send me the address," Min-jae said.
No.
The words sat in the air between them like something explosive. "Excuse me?" Min-jae's voice dropped into that register, the register that made full-grown men reschedule their entire lives. Dae-hyun squeezed his eyes shut. "I'm not sending you the address yet, because you'll come with 12 people and a plan, and that's not what she needs right now. She needs," he exhaled, "she needs you to understand something first. Dae-hyun. Do you even know why she left?" The photograph was sent to her. "I can explain. Hyung." Dae-hyun's voice dropped. Serious. Genuinely serious, which from him was so rare it commanded immediate attention. "I need you to go to the apartment. To your bedroom. Look on the bookshelf. Left side. 3rd shelf from the bottom. There's a brown leather diary."
Pause.
"She left it."
No.
"She has it with her. But she's been writing in it for months. Go look at the one on the shelf, her older one. The one from last year." Another pause. Longer this time. "Why?" Dae-hyun looked back out the window. Amara had convinced the cat to let her pet it.
She was talking to it.
He couldn't hear the words, but he could see the smile. Small, tired, real. "Because," he said quietly, "I think you've been loving her the way you know how. And I think she's been loving you the way you needed. But somewhere in the middle, nobody checked if she was okay. And she was too graceful to make you ask." The silence that followed was the longest yet. "I'll call you in 2 hours," Min-jae finally said. He sounded different. Not dangerous. Not powerful. Just quiet. Like a man standing at the edge of something he cannot take back. "Take your time," Dae-hyun said. "She's safe. She's not going anywhere tonight." He hung up and returned to his ramen. It was cold. He ate it anyway. Across Seoul, calm Min-jae walked into his empty bedroom, crouched before the bookshelf, and pulled out a brown leather diary. He sat on the floor, again because apparently the floor was where his life was happening now, and opened to the first page. What he read would take him apart completely, and rebuild him into someone new. The diary did not start with pain. That was what undid him first. It started with joy, So much of it that Min-jae sat on that bedroom floor barely breathing, turning page after page of Amara's handwriting, feeling like a man reading a love letter addressed to someone better than him. November 14th. He came home at 2 a.m. and tried to be quiet and knocked over literally everything in the kitchen, and then stood there looking at the fallen fruit bowl like it had personally offended him. I laughed so hard I cried. He pretended to be offended. He brought me tea anyway. He always brings me tea. Min-jae remembered that night. He had not thought about it in months. December 3rd. He put his hand on my belly today and felt the baby kick for the first time, and this man, this terrifying, untouchable man, whispered hello in the softest voice I have ever heard from a human being. I decided then that I would love him forever, whatever that costs. His throat tightened. He kept reading. The entries stayed warm through December. Then January arrived. January 9th. He missed our dinner again. I made galbi-jim for the first time by myself because I wanted to surprise him. It took 4 hours. I ate alone. He texted at midnight. Sorry. Emergency. I wrote back, okay, because what else do you write? January 19th, he was home, but not really here. He sat at the table and responded to everything I said with and I could have told him I was leaving to join a traveling circus, and he would have said The baby kicked 3 times. I told her he's just busy. I'm not sure I believe myself. February 2nd, I asked him today if he was happy. He looked surprised by the question. He said, of course, immediately, the way people say things they haven't actually thought about. I smiled and said good. I wrote for 2 hours after he fell asleep. February 14th, Valentine's Day. He sent flowers. 40 roses. I counted because I was alone when they arrived, and counting kept me occupied. The card said, always yours, Min-jae. I held it for a long time. I wonder if he knows what always feels like from the inside of it. I wonder if I'm allowed to need more than flowers. Min-jae put the book down, pressed his hands over his face. He sat like that for a long time. When he picked it back up, he read to the last entry before she left. March 31st. I think I've been shrinking. Not on purpose. But I catch myself editing before I speak, making myself smaller, so there's less of me to disappoint anyone. My grandmother used to say a woman who disappears inside her own love story is the saddest story ever told. I used to think she meant other women. I keep the lights in this apartment bright because the dark makes me think too much. I am so tired of being strong in the wrong direction. I love him. God, I love him. But I think love is supposed to see you. And I'm standing right here. The next page was blank, because that was the night the photograph came. Min-jae closed the diary, set it carefully on the bed beside him. Then he called Sung-jin. Cancel everything. Sir, the Bangkok delegation arrives Tomer. Cancel everything. A pause. And get me Lee Junyoung, his chief of staff. Tell him I need to make a statement. In person. Tonight. And Sung-jin, the photograph that was sent to my wife's phone. Find out who sent it.
Now.
He hung up and looked at the room around him. The room Amara had filled and brightened and moved through like she was its whole purpose. He had been so busy protecting his empire. He had forgotten to protect her peace. 47 minutes later, Sung-jin called back. The photograph had been sent by a mid-level rival attempting to fracture Min-jae's household and destabilize his operations. The woman in the image, a business associate, had not even been aware of what the photograph would be used for. It was, in the most devastating way possible, not what it looked like. And Amara Blake was sitting in a warm guest house in Itaewon, rebuilding herself from scratch because of a lie designed by an enemy and delivered at exactly the wrong moment. Min-jae stood in his empty penthouse and made a decision. He was going to her. Not with explanations. Not with power. Not with 40 roses. He was going with truth. The whole of it. And whatever happened after that, he would accept. Chapter 5. The Man Who Came Without His Armor. He came alone. That was the first thing Dae-hyun noticed when he spotted Min-jae walking down the Itaewon street at 7 in the evening. No Sung-jin, no security detail, no black SUV idling at the curb. Just his brother, in a dark coat, hands empty, looking like the most powerful man in Seoul had left all of his power somewhere else and walked here without it. Dae-hyun fell into step beside him, without a word.
She's inside, he said.
Madame Cho said she had dinner early and went to her room. Min-jae nodded. They walked in silence for a moment. Hyung. Dae-hyun hesitated. The photograph. I know. I looked into it while you were. I know, Dae-hyun. Min-jae stopped walking.
Turned to look at him.
There was something in his expression that Dae-hyun had genuinely never seen before. Not guilt exactly, but something adjacent to it.
Wider. Deeper.
It wasn't about the photograph. That's what I need her to understand. The photograph was the moment, but it wasn't the reason. Dae-hyun looked at him. She was disappearing, Min-jae said quietly. Right in front of me. And I was so busy being certain she was fine that I never actually checked. The younger brother was quiet for a long moment. You read the diary, he said. I did. All of it. All of it. Dae-hyun exhaled. Are you okay? Min-jae started walking again.
No.
But I'm about to try to be better. That's different. At the guest house door, Madame Cho materialized from absolutely nowhere. The woman moved like a spirit and positioned herself between Min-jae and the hallway with the energy of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment and had prepared extensively. She looked him up and down. Slowly. You, she said.
Me, he agreed.
She cried on the first night, Madame Cho informed him. Quietly. Because she has manners. Unlike some people who send women into the rain while pregnant. Min-jae held her gaze. You're right.
I'm sorry. Madame cho Berlin kết.
Apparently, she had prepared for several other responses, and this one had not been in the document. She stepped slightly to the side.
Room 7, she said.
Knock. If she says go away, you go away. Yes, ma'am. He walked to room 7. He stood outside the door for a moment. Just a moment. The pause of a man who has rehearsed nothing because he has finally understood that some things cannot be rehearsed. He knocked. Silence. Then, Dae-hyun, if that's you with more citrus tea, I swear. It's not Dae-hyun, Min-jae said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing he had ever heard. He waited. He heard movement. The soft sound of the floor. A pause just on the other side of the door that lasted approximately 1 century. Then the door opened. Amara stood there in a cream-colored dress, hair loose, feet bare on the warm ondal floor. She looked at him without expression. Not angry, not warm.
Just looking.
The way you look at someone when you are deciding what they are to you now. Min-jae looked at her. Really looked. The way the diary had taught him to, and saw what he had been missing for months. The careful stillness in her eyes. The slight squaring of her shoulders that meant she was preparing herself. The way she had one hand on the doorframe and one hand on her belly, unconsciously, protectively. She was magnificent. She was exhausted. She had been holding everything alone for so long.
Hi, he said.
Because all the words he had arranged in his head had apparently evacuated the building. Amara blinked. He exhaled. I read your diary. The old one. From the shelf. He watched her face shift, surprise, then something more guarded. I know I shouldn't have without asking. I'm not going to apologize for reading it. But I'm going to apologize, he stopped. Can I come in? A very long pause. You came alone, she said. Yes. No Sung-jin lurking around the corner?
Please.
I checked. He's in Gangnam, panicking
So
quietly.
sorry.
Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, but adjacent. She stepped back from the door. He walked into room 7. And finally, after everything, after the rain and the distance and the silence and the diary and the ring on the counter, they sat across from each other, and Kang Min-jae began to speak the truth. Every word. All of it.
No armor.
No power. Just a man telling a woman what she had deserved to hear for months. And Amara Blake, who had built herself back from nothing in a week, sat very still and listened. What she decided when he finished, that was the question that would change everything. He talked for an hour. He told her about the photograph, who sent it, why, what it actually was. He watched her face as he explained. She was steady. She processed the information with that quiet, intelligent stillness that had made him fall in love with her in the first place. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment.
So it wasn't what I thought, she said. No.
And you can prove this.
Yes.
I'll show you everything. Tonight, tomorrow, whenever you want. Every record, every contact, every detail. She nodded slowly. Okay. He waited for the relief to hit. It didn't come, because Amara wasn't done. That's good, Min-jae, she said. I'm glad it wasn't what I thought. That matters. A pause. But I also need you to understand something. Tell me. I didn't just leave because of the photograph. She met his eyes. I left because I had been sitting in that apartment for months feeling invisible. Feeling like I was shrinking. Feeling like I was having a whole life inside my head that I wasn't sharing with you because you were always somewhere else. Not physically, sometimes, but somewhere else. She pressed her hand to her chest. And I stopped telling you because I told myself you were busy. You were important. My feelings were inconvenient. She shook her head. That's not love, Min-jae. That's management. I was managing myself for your comfort and calling it partnership.
He sat with that.
He did not argue. He did not explain. He did not try to reframe it. He just sat with it, the way the diary had taught him, the way she had been sitting with things alone for so long. You're right, he said. I know. I missed it. I was so certain you were fine that I stopped checking if you were fine. That is a failure. My failure. Not because I didn't love you, but because I loved you lazily. Like you would always just be there. Like you were permanent, and therefore didn't need tending. He looked at his hands. You are the most permanently impermanent thing I have ever loved. And I mean that as the highest possible thing I could say. Amara looked at him for a long time. That's a very strange compliment. I'm a very strange man. You knocked over a fruit bowl trying to be quiet. The bowl started it. There was finally a real smile.
Small.
Cautious, but real. The baby chose this precise moment to kick. Hard. Amara exhaled in surprise, hand flying to her belly. Min-jae was on one knee beside her before the sound had finished leaving her mouth. Is she?
She's fine.
She just... Amara laughed a little shaky. She does this. She's dramatic. She gets it from you. She gets it from her mother, who walked out into a rainy Seoul night 7 months pregnant carrying only a diary and dramatic energy. I had 43,001. That is not reassuring, Amara. It was enough. He looked up at her. She looked down at him. The space between them felt different now, not smaller but more honest. Like a room with the windows opened. I'm not asking you to come home tonight, he said quietly. I'm not asking you to forgive everything right now. I know that's not how it works. He reached into his breast pocket, took out her ring, set it carefully on the nightstand. I'm asking you to let me show you, day by day, that I am paying attention now. Really paying attention. Not because I'm afraid to lose you, though I am. A breath. But because you deserve a love that sees you. And I want to be the person who provides that. If you'll give me the chance to learn. Amara looked at the ring. Looked at him. You have to actually show up, Min-jae. Not just protect, and provide. Show up. Emotionally. Present. Even when the empire is loud. Even when the empire is loud, he repeated.
Like a vow.
And you have to learn to ask how I am and actually wait for the real answer. Not definitely not done. She was quiet for a moment. I'm not putting the ring back on tonight, she said. I know, but I'm not asking you to leave either. He settled onto the floor beside the low bed, back against the frame, in the same posture she had sat in for a week, small, warm, figuring it out one day at a time. Madame Cho knocked at 9 to bring 2 cups of citrus tea, took one look at the scene, said acceptable under her breath, and left without further commentary. They didn't fix everything that night. Real love doesn't work that way. It doesn't snap back into shape with one good conversation. But something shifted. Something essential. The kind of shift that, if tended carefully, becomes the foundation of something stronger than what was there before. And in room 7 of a small Itaewon guest house, Kong Min-jae sat on a warm floor, held a cup of citrus tea, and for the first time in a long time, listened. 3 weeks later, Amara came home. Not because she had been won back like a prize. Not because she had been convinced or negotiated into it. She came home because she chose to, on her own terms, with her eyes fully open. And Min-jae, to his lasting credit, had spent those 3 weeks doing exactly what he said he would. He showed up. Every day. Not always perfectly. Day 4 he arrived at the guest house with what he described as a peace offering, which turned out to be a fruit bowl, a very expensive one, accompanied by such sincere eye contact that Amara laughed until her sides ached. Day 9, he arrived at clinic with Dr. Park, who looked only slightly terrified to be sitting in the same room as Korea's most feared criminal enterprise leader, while Min-jae asked detailed and genuinely well-researched questions about third trimester nutrition. Dr. Park later told his wife it was the strangest and most thorough prenatal consultation he had ever witnessed. Day 12, Dae Hyun appeared at the guest house uninvited, ate Madame Cho's entire tray of banchan, taught Amara 3 words of Jeju dialect that Min-jae confirmed were not appropriate for public use, and spent 2 hours making her laugh. On day 15, Min-jae arrived without announcement and sat across from Amara at the small table in room 7 and said, I want to tell you something about my father, about how I learned to love, or didn't learn, and why. He talked for 2 hours. She had never heard any of it before. She listened to all of it. On the morning she decided to go home, she picked up her wedding ring from the nightstand,
Held it.
then slid it back onto her finger, quietly, by herself, as a private decision. Then she came to find him. He was downstairs, talking to Madame Cho, or more accurately, being cross-examined by Madame Cho, who had assembled what appeared to be an informal list of requirements and expectations regarding his behavior going forward. He was nodding with genuine sincerity. He had apparently already agreed to 3 things Amara couldn't hear. What did you agree to? She asked. Weekly check-ins. No work phones at dinner. And I have to learn to make mayakguk.
He paused.
The seaweed soup. I know what mayakguk is. Madame Cho is very particular about the ratio. Amara looked at him. He looked at her. His gaze dropped to her hand, to the ring. He didn't say anything. He just exhaled, slow and long, like a man who had been holding his breath for a month. Ready? She asked. I've been ready, he said. I'm sorry it took me so long to deserve the question. She took his hand. He held it carefully. The way you hold something you understand, finally, is fragile and precious and not guaranteed. They said goodbye to Madame Cho, who pressed a container of homemade soup into Amara's hands, told Min-jae she would be monitoring the situation, and returned behind her beaded curtain with the satisfied expression of a woman who had handled this correctly. In the car, just the 2 of them. No Sung-jin, no detail. Amara leaned her head against the window and watched Seoul pass in its noise and light and beautiful chaos. Min-jae. Yes. When she's born, our daughter. She felt him still beside her. I want her to grow up knowing that her mother didn't disappear into love. That her mother loved herself enough to ask for what she deserved. She turned to look at him, and that her father was the kind of man who heard that and changed. Min-jae reached across, found her hand in her lap, held it. She'll know, he said. I'll make sure she knows. Amara nodded, looked back out the window. Good. The city moved around them, loud, alive, indifferent in the way that cities are, and in the back of a quiet car on a Thursday evening, two people rebuilt something better than what they had before. Not perfect, but honest.
Seen.
Tended.
Real.
Their daughter was born 6 weeks later, at 4:17 a.m., in the same hospital where Min-jae had once negotiated a business arrangement in the parking garage. He held her for the first time and said nothing for 3 full minutes. Just looked at her. Amara, exhausted and radiant, watched him. Well, she asked. He looked up. His eyes were wet. Yellow was the right color, he said. Amara Blake laughed. And across the delivery room, all of it, the rain, the ring, the diary, the guest house, all of it settled into its rightful place. Not a wound. A foundation. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. Take care of yourself this week. Drink your water.
Rest.
And we will see you in the next video, where the next story is already waiting, and I promise it will be worth every second.